Welcome to this step-by-step Christmas card tutorial of this cute little robin. I hope you're going to enjoy the techniques. It's suitable for beginners. Let's get started. I'm using just 4 colours: ultramarine, cadmium red, yellow and burnt sienna. As you can see, I've sketched in the drawing here for the card, and I've also masked out using masking fluid the snowfall and the snow on the berries as well. I've got here, just to show you a bit about masking fluid, make sure you dip your brush into some liquid soap first to protect it, and then literally just start painting little snow balls in the air like that. You can put a little bit in the eye and a little bit on the top of his beak, and also top of his head. The snow's fallen on the top of his head, on top of the berries, just where you feel the snow would have fallen on top of, a little bit on the branches as well. So just carry on doing that. So I'm going to allow my painting to dry naturally to allow the masking fluid to dry. And I'm going to start using a mix of ultramarine. And this is going to be for my sky, so just get a little dab of paint. I don't want this to be too dark, so lots and lots of water if you can. Always make sure you make plenty of wash. Nothing worse than running out halfway through. Plenty of it, but you want it quite dilute. And this is really suitable for beginners in watercolour. When you're painting in watercolour, make sure you always sort of fully load that brush. And large area, large brush. And keep going back every couple of strokes with fresh paint. That way you'll avoid streaking and cauliflowers, and the paint doesn't dry as fast because you've always got plenty of paint applied to the paper. So just going painting carefully round my cute little robin. And I'm still just using that mixture of ultramarine. So again, just make sure you have plenty of paint so you don't have to mix halfway through, because you're painting, the background will start to dry. So I'm just going to paint over his legs as well, because his legs are going to be darker. So don't worry about that. I'm just going to lift up my thing there and just put the rest on here. Ultramarine wash, lovely. Just pop that down. It's just so you can see what I'm doing with the colour mixing. Just going to paint it down the bottom as well, around the bird. Keep loading that brush, keep putting paint. I wouldn't advise putting your palette on top of a damp painting. It is just for demonstration purposes. So you can see my palette and the painting close up. Just going to go around these berries. You can be quite loose with this as well. It doesn't have to be too tight. So I'm just loading my brush again and just working my way around the negative space with the berries and the holly leaves here. Just using this ultramarine, loading again. And I'm just lifting up my palette. As you can see, I've got a mark there. I'm just sort of brushing it away. And I'm going to allow my painting to dry. What I'm going to do next, after I've dried my background, is I'm going to paint the breast of the robin. So I'm mixing a bit of red and yellow, picking out that to make a nice sort of orangey colour. And you can either, quite a good idea, if you just wet the front of the robin here, you can paint the red part of his robin red breast just there. Look, putting a little bit of orange first, and then add a little bit of the red, and let that sort of, see how that's running sort of, it almost makes it look like the feathers as well, which is quite sweet. I paint around the eye. Don't worry if you get over the eye actually, because the eye is going to be much darker, as is the beak, so don't worry. That's really nice the way that's run there. Put a touch more red in there as well, just here and there. Oh, look at the way that runs, it's gorgeous. Put a little bit more at the front of his face. There, I'm just going to try and get the tip of my brush to be a little bit more accurate. Touch here, touch there. Marvellous. Bring that around there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is wet the sort of his feathers around here, around the back of him. Try not to touch the red. I might just touch it a little bit there just to soften that edge there, and use a little bit of the burnt sienna now and just put a little bit of that in the robin, just underneath here, touch there, a little touch there. Then I'm going to add a bit of ultramarine to that burnt sienna. It makes it, well, I want to add more burnt sienna than the ultramarine. I just want to make a nice dark brown. Look how that's gone just by adding a bit of the blue to that. Just going to make that quite dark. Adding a bit more blue, making the paint a little bit thicker. Make that paint lovely and thick. Just going to put that little bits like that, and also I'm going to get in a little bit closer here, a bit more ultramarine to make it more of a bluey grey, and just put some feathers just in there. Put that there. A little bit at the top as well, and a touch on the beak, trying not to really sort of bleed into the red. If you're worried about it, just give it another blow dry so it doesn't spoil it. There, just a few more little. It might be a good idea just to move to a slightly smaller, well actually a lot smaller, this brush, a size 2 round brush, just to put some of these details on. And I'm actually doing it damp into damp, so the brush hasn't got loads and loads of paint on, and the painting is now quite damp, it's not too wet. Just going to put a little bit of shading just down here. It's starting to come to life. A little bit more here, and lastly I'm going to put a little bit of dark in his eye as well, just a tad. Damp into damp with a mixture of the ultramarine and burnt sienna. And if you're worried about that dark running into the red, allow your painting to dry and then paint it wet on dry. Look how he's come to life. Now I'm going to paint his legs in and his feet grasping on that branch with a bit of the burnt sienna and the ultramarine. Kind of coming down there. This is all wet on dry, and use a brush that you're comfortable with, and just keep the legs and the feet simple. Okay, and while that's sort of drying off a bit, I'm going to paint some of the berries and the branches as well now as well. So the branch, well it's not really a branch is it, it's more of a twig, little twig. Going to paint in a bit of a green. Green's a lovely colour as well, isn't it, for getting that Christmassy feel. So a bit of the ultramarine and yellow. Let's pop that in. I'll try and get the right consistency there. So kind of a milky consistency, so not too watery but also not too thick and creamy. And it's about 50% yellow and 50% ultramarine. And this is all wet on dry. And I'm using my size 8 brush. And I'm going to use this same colour mixture for the actual leaves here, still using the size 8 brush with a mixture of the ultramarine mixed with the yellow, and this is all wet on dry. I've actually added a touch more ultramarine to this leaf here on the left, create a little bit more shadow, and dropping in a little bit more of that blue-green wash there, wet into wet with my size 8 brush. Lastly, I'm going to put the berry colour in. So I've mixed up again a milky wash, so not too watery but not too creamy, and I'm painting this wet on dry with my size 8 brush. This really does give it a little Christmas feel, doesn't it? Just putting that berry, lovely red colour in there. And I'm just mixing up a slightly creamier red now, painting damp into wet so that it makes it a tad darker at the bottom, just a bit of thicker paint. And I'm going to use a bit of tissue just to lift off a little highlight on the berries as well. And then I'm going to allow my painting to dry once more. What I'm going to do now is just work on the detail to finish off before I take off my masking fluid. So I'm going to put a little bit of dark underneath the twig here. Creates a nice bit of shadow, maybe a little bit of definition on the holly leaves, a little bit of shadow, touch of shadow on the berries as well. And I've used the red with a tiny touch of the ultramarine, about 5%, painting wet on dry using my size 6 round brush. Keeping everything simple, just painting that darker red there, a few marks here and there. I'm going to darken up his eyes. Bit of ultramarine burnt sienna to make that lovely dark. It bled a little bit before, but not to worry. Now this is all wet on dry, so there's no danger of it bleeding at all, but I'm just putting in little bits of detail with the burnt sienna and ultramarine, just finishing off with some detail here, just bringing our little robin to life there. Little markings in his feathers there, a few little markings in his head there, and just to work his feet and legs there. Try to vary your marks and remember less is more. I will sort of just wet his little belly area and just put a very, very pale sort of blue shadowy colour there. And that's just about 95% ultramarine with about 5% burnt sienna, or you could use the red as an alternative to the brown. And allow your painting to dry once again. When you're taking off masking fluid, always make sure you thoroughly blow dry your picture. Just to show you here, look how effective that is now, just taking that off. And you can use framing tape, masking tape, a putty rubber, or even your thumb to remove the masking fluid. And it really does give the illusion of snow on the little twig there and in the background as well. It's quite nice, and it's quite a nice idea for a Christmas card. I really hope you enjoy this tutorial, and if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments section. And if you'd like to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe to my channel where you'll get updates of my latest tutorials. And if you'd like to get access to my weekly exclusive watercolour tutorials with downloadable outline sketches, why not think about joining my Patreon membership? Details about the membership can be found in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Happy painting. Bye for now.